Thank you for joining me today as we go over campus climate and diversity, looking at the relationship, the culture, and the role of student affairs. Now let's begin first with the history as an introduction. As the institution begins to discuss diversity in the 1970s and 1980s, conversations often focused on how to address the needs and increase the success of students from racial or ethnic groups underrepresented in higher education. In addition, legal challenges levied against the use of affirmative action in college admissions pushed the conceptualization of diversity as largely linked to race and ethnicity. As the Supreme Court considered the continued need and constitutional basis for affirmative action policies, the arguments that gained the most traction were rooted in the diversity rationale, which claims that increasing the number of individuals from diverse backgrounds leads to gains in learning and enhances students' abilities to engage in our increasingly diverse democracy. Now let's take a look at the management staff that actually work in this area. Now those would encompass our student service administrator, student affairs administrator, dean of students, admissions director, student housing director, financial aid administrator, and academic affairs administrator, to name a few. Now, the required education and experience for a student affairs leader, let's say general practitioner, well, some student affairs professionals and college student personnel have completed graduate work with a complementary assistantship. An assistantship can be an entry-level position, but is usually a part-time paraprofessional position with compensation including tuition waiver, professional development, and a stipend. These are sometimes called graduate assistant programs. Now, the graduate program is usually 2 academic years of full-time study with opportunities for internship and abroad opportunities. Now, student affairs professionals or college student personnel graduate programs may also include classes in psychology, business, law, communication, inter and intrapersonal counseling, higher education, and group dynamic. Now we will cover programming and services that are offered with purpose. The role of student affairs in improving the climate of a campus first begins with the counselor's own understanding of the culture and climate of their university. The second needful exercise will be for the counselor's own redirect and self-assessment of their own attitude and behavior towards institutionalized diversity and exactly what it means to them. Armed with these tools, they can then effectively begin to mitigate circumstances involving diversity by conducting outreach programs, developing mentor programs, and serving as liaisons between faculty, administrators, and students as needed. Addressing potential student and faculty racism by facilitating faculty orientation programs to include workshops and instructional equity programs as well. Other programming and services that are also offered with purpose can also encompass counselors that can also serve as informational consultants to faculty interested in culturally relevant course materials that would be a recommended exercise to pursue each year. Conducting quarterly goal-oriented breaking bread discussions between students with diverse backgrounds and gender orientations on campus and in housing can also be a service implemented with purpose. As an example, now let's look at the theories related to this area of cultural climate and diversity. One such theory is the critical race theory, or CRT. The critical race theory was created by Black, Latino, and Asian legal scholars as they sought to better understand societal issues such as the failure of civil rights legislation and the relationship between race and the law. One of these such scholars, Taylor, indicated that CRT has been extended to apply not only to legal issues, but also to areas in education and women's studies. Now, CRT is an interdisciplinary in its approach because it incorporates various intellectual traditions that promote racial justice and includes an activist dimension that makes known how society is organized around race in order to transform structures that have long perpetuated racial injustice. Another theory related to the area of cultural climate and diversity encompassed Finney's theory of racial and ethnic identity development. Finney developed a theory describing an identity process applicable to all minority racial or ethnic groups. Her model features three stages: diffusion, foreclosure, moratorium, and identity achievement. She proposes that students who belong to minority racial or ethnic groups experience fundamental conflicts that occur as a result of their membership in a minority group. Students experience threats to their identities as they experience stereotyping and prejudicial treatment. Students must critically examine their racial or ethnic identity to successfully resolve the threats. Now let's look at a list of the professional association related to this program area of interest. They include the National Association of Student Personnel Administration, or NASPA, American Personnel Association, or ACPA, Southern Association for College Student Affairs, or SASCA, North Carolina College Personnel Association, or the NCCPA, as well as the American Council of Education, or ACE. Now let's take a look at some of the ethical and professional concerns arising from this unit of practice. Now they would be the high expectations from the campus community around transparency and communication, inclusion and support. It would also be resource constraints as a public institution of higher education, as well as more acute recent financial pressures, including rapid enrollment growth that may outstrip staffing and resources and existing infrastructure. The current polarized political environment and larger cultural outside campus has effects on the climate, culture, and discourse on campus as well. The college must balance competing values, like the community's need for transparency and accountability, and the importance of protecting individual due process and privacy rights, in effect to ensure fairness to all parties. Now, what are the current and emerging issues and trends in this unit of practice? Well, while some argue that students' access to higher education has improved precisely as a result of greater attention to climate issues and demographics, gaps in completion and success rates remain for many marginalized groups as compared to their majority peers. For example, Hispanic students are now the largest minority group in four-year colleges and universities. Yet, despite their growing presence on college campus, their persistence and attainment rates consistently fall behind those of other racial and ethnic groups. Now, to help close these and other gaps, colleges and universities will need to ensure that campus climates affirm the value of diversity. So what do I want others to learn from this presentation? I want others to learn the importance of cultural climate and diversity, and the many aspects of what contributes to ethical and professional issues that do have an answer that student affairs professionals can pursue. For example, environmental and outside societal disruptions that calls for inside internal interventions from faculty and staff with programs designed for anxiety reduction, self-help activities, and counseling. Internal dissonance confusion, and unrest that calls for co-curricular programs placing the student in the real-world environment of socio-economic living with a first-hand experience in learning. Marginalized, isolated student groups or individual students positioned to meet with mentor opportunities as a mandate for their undergrad curriculum. Why is this student affairs assignment in particular important for student affairs professionals? Well, a redirect and self-assessment of our own attitude and behavior towards institutionalized diversity and exactly what it means to us will allow a more effective and unbiased approach to emerging issues on our campus, first of all. As student affairs professionals, we are in positions to support and encourage or silence and further marginalize those who are lacking power. Thus, rather than relying on specialists to manage any issues that may arise, it is advisable that all student affairs professionals possess a baseline level of knowledge about campus climate and diversity to offer students holistic support and foster more inclusive communities. What was the most significant thing that I learned during my research from this presentation? Well, students who learn about different cultures during their education feel more comfortable and safer with these differences later in life. That's one of the first things. Now, this allows them to interact in a wider range of social groups and feel more confident in themselves as well as in their interactions with others. Another thing of significance that I learned is that diversity in education, particularly on college campuses, improve the intellectual engagement, self-motivation, citizenship, and cultural engagement and academic skills like critical thinking, problem solving, and writing for students of all races. Interacting with diverse peers outside a classroom setting directly benefits students, making them better scholars, thinkers, and ultimately citizens. Here is a page of my references that I used to prepare in the presentation of this paper. At this time, I would like to thank you for allowing me to share with you my presentation on cultural climate and diversity. Thank you very much.